Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 2023 meeting of the Lower Makefield Township Historical Commission. I'm Joe Camarata, chairman of the commission, and joined tonight by other commission members and our new liaison from the Board of Supervisors, John Lewis. Welcome, John.
Hey now. Hi.
So I thought what we might do just to start things off as we come to order is just to go around and introduce ourselves, since John's new and doesn't know many of us, and we probably don't know him either. So as we'll start, I'll start, and then maybe I'll turn it over to Helen, and then Tom and Chris, and then we'll end with John.
Can you see me?
No,
Nope.
We don't see you, Helen.
No?
We just see some.
Okay. Let me see if I start video, if that does it.
There you go.
There you go. Now we see you in your wood burning stove. So good. Well, good. Good. I'm Joe Camarata. As I mentioned, I'm chairman of the commission. It's my second year, assuming you vote me in as chair of the commission. My fourth year on the commission. I've lived in Lower Makefield Township since 2019, when we moved here from New Jersey. Helen?
Okay, I'm Helen Hines. I guess I'm vice chair of the Historical Commission. I've been on the commission since 1986. Way too long. I'm teach history in college, but lately after COVID, I'm kind of out of that situation. So I do a lot of local lecturing and topics of local history, and I love to talk to the elementary school kids when they're doing Pennsylvania history, and particularly Lower Makefield history.
Tom Argenteri. Nice to meet you, John. I guess I'm the treasurer of the committee. I'm not sure what that means. I'm trying to figure that out. I joined the commission last March, I believe. Is that right, Joe? Something like that. Mm-hmm. I've lived in Lower Makefield for close to 40 years. A semi-retired at this point, spent most of my career in academia and big pharma.
And Chris.
Yeah. Hi, John. I'm Chris Greeley. I have lived in Lower Makefield for, I think it's about a year and a half. Joined the commission shortly after moving here. So I've been around since the end of 2021. And yeah, looking forward to working with you going forward.
And John, we have one other member, Victor Furio, who can't be with us tonight. He goes to university. He actually has a class this evening. So we'll have to talk about whether we can reschedule our meetings for the next few weeks. I'll put a note out with some other possible times because Victor won't be able to join at this time, or we can just let it ride and have him join us when his class is done. But I'll put some alternatives out there for us to look at later this week. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. I'm John Lewis. I'm one of your Board of Supervisors. I've been a Lower Makefield resident for close to 20 years. And let's see, I was first elected in 2015, reelected in 2021. So I don't have enough sense to know when to say when it comes to elected public service. So I have the Historic Commission is one of the few boards I have not been the liaison. So this is my first time as a liaison of the Historic Commission. So that it's great because I like to circulate and learn all about different parts of the community. I've known Helen for 20, well, not 20 years, 15 maybe. Wow. So yes, looking forward to working with you guys this year.
Good. Thanks for taking that on, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So I guess the first thing we need to do is elect or re-elect our officers. And John, is this something that you lead in terms of the discussion?
No, I'm a liaison, which means that I don't have a voting role. I'm here for you to ask me questions and me to be helpful and for me to listen. Okay. So I don't get to vote. You can choose whoever you want as your chair, vice chair.
Oh, I just meant in terms of.
Can I make the motion that we re-elect the board that's in place right now for another year?
That is actually a very efficient emotion.
I'll second that. Yeah.
Okay, good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, good. We'll cross that off of our agenda for this evening. Thank you, Helen.
Well done, Helen.
Yes. Okay, we had on our agenda for this evening, 2 items of new business and then a couple of items on existing. And one of the things that we had discussed was that we would put together a list of our accomplishments from 2022. So John, at the beginning of the year, we had set some goals and objectives for the commission, not all of which we reached. We made some adjustments mid-year as we found out that we probably bit off a little bit more than we could chew. But we put a document together that listed those accomplishments. And John, I was hoping that through your guidance, we could, either email that to the Board of Supervisors or something that you could email on our behalf or, something like that. So they just know what the commission is up to.
Yeah, so
Accomplished.
I have the 2023 goals and objectives, right?
Right. But there's a 2022 document in there. And I guess the first question that I had for the commission members is, did you have any comments on that document? Did I forget anything? Did you want me to add anything else or take anything out or?
I didn't, Joe.
I'm good with it, Joe.
Okay.
Same.
Good. So then I guess, John, the question would be, how do I go about circulating that so people can be familiar with what the commission did last year?
Oh, I can certainly do that. I can just send the email, or if you want to say, either one is fine. Not a problem.
Let me send it over to you. I'll just give it one more quick read, make sure there's no other grammatical errors in it, and then I'll send it to you. And then if you would forward that on our behalf, we would appreciate it.
Awesome.
So then on to the 2023 goals and objectives. They look a lot like the 2022 ones because we brought a lot of projects over. I think I only added 1 or 2 to it. Did anybody have any comments on those?
Nope.
Plugging away.
Yep.
So just a couple of things. There's 2 TBDs on there, which I'd like to discuss. So one of the things which we started working on last year, which was actually not in our goals and objectives, but we started anyway, was preservation and maintenance of Slate Hill Cemetery. And this really kind of got started in thinking about the America 2026 celebration, and that it is on the National Register of Historic Places, and it does need a little bit of, if you would, sprucing up before we actually would have many people come to visit it. So I've been doing some work in terms of what is involved in creating a master plan for that. And with Tom's help, we have spoken to someone who is from Keystone Preservation Group, Chris Fay, who would come in and be able to, reset and some of those markers that are either sinking into the ground or falling over. Helen, this doesn't include actually looking for ones that are buried. We're just looking for the ones that are obviously, right now need to be reset and things like that. So Tom and I met on Saturday. We did some markings, but I guess the question is in terms of creating the plan and actually going through, we're going to apply for a Keystone Preservation grant for this. I would be glad to work on it. Tom, would you want to continue to work on it with me?
Yeah, I think I'd mentioned that early on, that I'd be happy to help you out with that.
Okay, so I'll put our names next to that.
I am supposed to dig up the Slate Hill Cemetery previous grant from Thompson's last submission, and I think it was 1992 when we did the wall, and he got it nominated to the National Register.
Right.
I was trying to get the highway sign that the state provides for National Register properties, and it ended up being it's a way more difficult to get that than it is to get the silly or to get the National Register nomination, because the state of Pennsylvania really dislikes marking cemeteries because I don't know why, but they just dislike it. However, I think I'm going to come at it from a different angle, and I discussed it with the PHMC people about 1.5 years ago, and they thought it was a good idea to talk about the Slate Hill Cemetery as one of the only documented Quaker cemetery from the first century of Quakers, from the 17th century. So that is pretty cool.
Yep.
And the second part was to tie it even more strongly to the African American community and the abolitionist movement and the Civil War soldiers that are in the segregated section, which is, a shameful sort of part of our history, but also a part that actually exists. And I've touched base with the lady who's getting very active in the AME Church in Yardley, off of I guess it's off of Letchworth. And I'm having a meeting with her on Saturday. So she wants to discuss the fact that she may have some records that show at least one, if not all three, of the African American churches in Yardley used that lower Makefield section of the cemetery donated by Anderson to bury their dead, which means it's all the Civil War and post-Civil War free Blacks. So it's really kind of cool. And I think that those two things should push the state into giving us that monument, especially if we can lean on Perry and Steve a little bit to help out in the assembly.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about, it's important, Helen. We'll talk more about Slate Hill when we get into our existing business. But in that case, then I'll add your name also alongside Tom and I in terms
of absolutely. That's fine.
All three.
At this point, I'm seriously considering pulling back a lot of my involvement at Jefferson and doing a lot more locally. It's just, it's getting after the episode, it's just getting too complicated to stress myself driving down the boulevard twice a week. So, I may pull back even more than I had before.
Okay. The other item on here that has TBD, we talked about last time that in 2026 is the celebration of America 250. And I had spoke to Monica Tierney from Parks and Recreation about, what events should we be thinking about as a township for putting on. So there is some work that's starting to be done at the county level on this. So Bucks County starting to get their act together. I don't know if, for those of you that belong to the Friends of Washington Crossing, you'll see that they just hired someone there to be responsible for this. And so Washington Crossing, as you can imagine, is going to be all over this, right? But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be, and other townships should not be involved in this. So last time we brainstormed some topics, and then again, we're going to start the planning this year, but but what I was actually looking for is there anyone who would like to be working with Monica on this to begin to say what should we be doing as a township and kind of putting some plans in place? Helen?
Again, I've already done a map of the houses that were and structures that were extant when Washington was in the township. And I've got lots of things to suggest to Monica. So okay. I'd be happy to do it. If somebody else, maybe Victor would. I'll ask him. I think he would like that as well.
All right. If you reach out to Victor, I have a call set up. I'll copy you. Hopefully you can make it. Monica and I had a call set up just kind of at the beginning of the year, just to touch base on this and get things started. So I'll make sure that I invite you to that also. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So then can I get with those adjustments to the TBDs, can I get a motion to accept the 2023 goals and objectives?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, cool. Good. Thank you.
You didn't ask for any dissent?
We all said aye.
All those Cams too.
Unanimous.
Yeah.
Hey, we're an easy committee, John.
All right, let's go through existing business, which largely is kind of follow up of the goals and objectives that we have in place. And let's start with, one of the things that we did last year under Chris's leadership is we applied for a grant to begin to catalog and digitize some of the materials that we have on the township's history. So, Chris, maybe you can just update people in terms of what happened with that grant. And then maybe some next steps.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the grant was not accepted. So we received that news at the end of December. We are setting up a feedback call with the state to understand why and where we fell short in the application. We are looking at additional grant opportunities for the project to fund the project. Jim Majewski did mention when we were cleaning out the basement that there was likely money there for us to get started on the project, even without the grant, if the grant was not approved. So we'll be kind of tapping into that a little bit too to get started. Really indexing and cataloging a lot of digital materials that are already exist on the Google Drive, as well as the original materials that we found going through the basement in the township building, and then some of the old Historic Society documents that haven't been digitized that are in the meeting room. So we'll be starting on that project this year, and then looking for grants in parallel. Is that a fair recap, Joe?
It is. And we had a conversation with Megan McNish from the PA, they call SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, and she's the Eastern coordinator. And she had made us aware of these grants that are available to what's called the CLG, Certified Local Governments, of which Lower Makefield Township is one, right? Because we have such a historic presence. And there's certain CLG grants, and we kind of reviewed this project with her. Chris mentioned it to her. She said this would be the perfect type of project for that grant. And actually, I think it's a little bit even more money than the HARC grant. So she's going to let us know when that grant opportunity opens up. But I think we immediately should begin to apply for funding from that.
That sounds perfect, and I'm reaching out to get feedback on the other one. Hopefully, we can incorporate the feedback from the HARP grant into this one to make sure that we've got all of our ducks in a row.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, you might reach out to her and also ask her if she can provide an example of a grant.
Yeah, she's going to apply for a Keystone. Right.
Yeah, she said she would provide one for an example for a construction grant for Slate Hill.
Okay, I'll reach out to her.
Be very, very valuable to have that.
Right. And I would say, Chris, one other thing we can do in the meantime while we're waiting for that is we could get together again. Like, we cleaned out that basement and we did a kind of a real rough terms of, keep or not keep, right? But the stuff that we kept, we didn't really kind of go through it in fine detail. Okay. Is it original or is it a duplicate? And, does it belong to the history of the township, or is it the historical commission? So we could do a little bit more cataloging on our own and going through those materials instead of maybe like 4 completely packed drawers. We can get it down to, 4 lightly packed drawers or something like that.
But
and
I still want to know where this legendary warehouse is that other stuff was put away in. I have never seen it. I've heard it exists, but I don't know where it is.
We got roughly the same response from Jim when we were putting the grant together, because we did go to him and ask if there was a warehouse somewhere that had materials in it, and he said, I've heard that too, but I'm not aware of any. So,
oh, geez.
I know it existed when Terry was around, but I don't know what happened since. I just knew it was an off-site warehouse that the township put things in that were old and no longer used. And every once in a while, someone would come in and request them, and they'd have to send somebody to dig it out. And it was very inconvenient. So, basically, we were kind of put aside. But I don't know if such a thing exists, John. Maybe you could find out for us.
Good call. Well, we did Monday. We just had our new township manager get started. So he is currently drinking from a fire hose of information from everybody. But it is something. Now's the time for him to find all the stuff that we have out there as far as assets, and that would be probably one that would be worth looking for. Yeah.
Well, let's give him a chance to.
So yeah, and Jim, he knows about
the
the storage facility.
Sorry, John?
Well, one man's trash is another man's treasure is the problem, and somebody might think something is not important and toss it.
So I know Jim Majewski and our community development group is going through a digitization project for all the building permits, that we've been going part of the Open Gov initiative that we have for tracking all that. So that will free up space, which is then going to be used by other parts of the township, but I don't know about the storage facility. So you're saying he would know, or who knew?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know who would know at this point. And I know Mr. Dillon is still around someplace. He was prior to Terry. I don't know. It just would be nice to know if, I know my husband at one point had requested, probably sometime in the 90s, the Thomas Tyler Moore map that had been developed that was like on a, literally an inch to 10 feet of the entire township of the existing conditions around 1985. And they dug it out, and it was a Bundes document with probably 50 pages of big maps that you turned over to get to each sort of property in the township. And it was utterly amazing, with all kinds of notations about, drainage and water and all that kind of stuff. But it was falling apart at that point. And I don't know where that ended up, in some engineer's office, or again, supposedly it was in the warehouse. And he had dug it out because he was trying to map a particular parcel for an addition he was doing. And they found this water course that he needed to correct for. And so that's why I know it exists. At that point, that was probably in the 90s, but I don't know what's happened since then. Every time I mention it, they just roll their eyes and kind of go, yeah, okay.
And I guess at one point we heard that over at the community center, there was some information that had to do with the township history. So I guess maybe Chris, we can follow up with Jim again just on those 2 points.
Well, the other part as a historian and archivist that I would like to see would be just regular township meeting records and how far back they go, into the 40s, into the 30s. I mean, I have no idea. We arrived here about 1985, 86. So I have no idea who was supervisor before that and how the township was run. I think it would be fascinating to find out.
Lots of the material that we found in the basement had to do with old minutes of the historical commission, which we kept because we weren't sure if they were the only copies of those minutes, right?
Excellent.
Yeah. So, I mean, so there were some from the newer, like just from a couple of years ago, which we know are online, but the older ones we kept. So Chris, Helen had offered her services as an archivist to sit with us and kind of go through that stuff and say, yeah, this is something you might want to hold on to, and this is something you probably don't need. So, I mean, again, we can start doing that already this quarter, right? First quarter, and start sorting through some things. Might make our job a little bit easier.
I had worked at the Spruance Museum in Doylestown, John, for about 5 years before I went back and got my PhD. And I know that they were desperate to find township records back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And several townships had conferred their records on the museum, but there was nothing from Lower Makefield, nothing from Lower Bucks at all. And that's why I was curious as to what happened to all of Lower Bucks's history. It was just such a critical point in time. And I don't know. Anyway.
So, Chris,
moving on.
Chris, can I leave with you to take an action item in terms of kind of bringing the group together to go through that and just look at what we have there? Is it worthwhile to keep or not?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay. I know based on your schedule, if you could just find out when people are available. Okay.
Yep. No problem, Joe.
All right. Good. The second topic is the Facebook content calendar that Victor had put together, and obviously he's not here, so I'm going to follow up with him and see if he still would be available to.
Yeah, I honestly have not even looked at it in months, but they're still there. Slideshows from fourth grade classes at Edgewood. I did like 3 or 4 fourth grade classes, Pennsylvania Day history, and it ended up being a series of 3 lectures, and it was all on Zoom. I do have clearances, so I can go into schools because I also volunteer a lot with Scouts. So I should be able to get clearances to go in if they want me to go in this year. I don't like to push it too much, but I was upset because on Zoom cameras, I saw what the teachers were using at Pennsbury for history of Yardley. And it was basically realtor films and advertisements from Yardley Borough. And it was like awful. So I literally sat down and made one because my little Lucy was in 4th grade. Max is in 4th grade this year, so I'll be back there kind of trying to push some real history on them so that they get to at least understand that some of the buildings literally across the street from Edgewood or across the street from Quarry Hill are historic houses that are over 150 or 200 years old. And the kids are like, whoa, you know, when they figure that out. It really is kind of interesting. So I do real local stuff so that they can connect to it, and then talk about Washington being here, and talk about you know, Native Americans being here first and what they did to change the environment, and just go through the whole thing from Native Americans to U.S. Steel. You know, if we can get that in there. So Victor's trying to cut me down to like short little lectures, and we're going to try to get it on a YouTube type format.
And there's like short things that are coming through on the Facebook.
Yeah.
They're great. First off, they give the township content all year long, right? When they don't always have content, believe it or not. And 2, they're interesting. So you're like, oh, I'm scrolling. I did not know that. Right? Yeah. So you're going to click on that. Helps build engagement. And if we had 1 or 2 minute, like 30 seconds, did you know? Those would be helpful too in terms of keeping that stuff out there so that people know, you know, what's happening and get a sense of it. And also, you know, short videos. I mean, we've done stuff in the past, but that stuff, it's good. You can keep using it. You know, there'll be a, you know, December 26th next year for us to follow up on, you know, like Washington's Crossing or the stuff on that, or, you know, the Doan family will be still breaking banks these days, but different.
Yeah, 2026 is the big 250th. So that's what we're kind of aiming for long term. So that would be a really kind of amazing. I certainly could think of encampments around the area would be just really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. But you're right, John. I mean, that was our target, was to provide some content to Jim for the Facebook page so that people got, you know, ideally twice a month, and kind of just a little bit of snippet of the history of the township. I mean, this is actually something that you and I had discussed last year around just getting that outreach and that education. So I'll follow up with Victor. He offered to put together a calendar and then provide some material, and hopefully, you know, his course load is not so much. He'll still be able to do that for us. Good. So let's look at the resubmission of Patterson Farm to the National Register. So that's Helen and Tom. I know that.
I just sent him an email, poor Tom, of all the property names of people who owned the Patterson Farm properties and the adjoining farms. And I took a quick glance at the 1850 agricultural census and then did a quick crush of the numbers that you had given me for Falls Township, Middletown, Newtown, and Upper Makefield. And it came up, I noticed if you could put it together so that it shows what I think happened, which was that even though this township had less or fewer farms and less acreage under cultivation in the 1850 census, we were far more efficient and a more valuable source of agriculture than any of the surrounding townships. So that tells me that already by 1850, LMT is concentrating its agriculture on the market and really starting to move very aggressively against Falls Township and against Newtown and Middletown to be more efficient in their farming. So they're concentrating on dairy, and they were concentrating on grains and commodities like butter that were just incredible amounts and incredible value, and a beginning of a whole orchard industry, which was really kind of neat. And I think if we do that for each of the agricultural censuses, I think we're going to come up with a pretty good, I'm hoping we'll come up with a pretty good thesis that Lower Makefield has always responded to food crises in a really particular way that is successful with the market. And we need to keep that in mind for any future use of the Patterson Farm, which is was at at the point I was calculating the values of all the farms in the township, and the most valuable farm was William Yardley's, coming in around $20,000 at that point in time. And together, the Janney farm, no, at that point it was the Joseph Yardley farm and the Satterthwaite farm together exceeded the William Yardley farm. So, and even though the acreage was about the same. So basically, the Patterson farm was the crown jewel, is what I'm saying, of Lower Makefield farm steads in that era. They came in around 22,000 together. So that is really amazing that we can document that. And that's without the land that is currently on the other side of Mirror Lake Farm.
Helen, did you say you sent me an email?
Yeah, I sent you the it's a 2-page document called owners. And so if you would look at the adjoining farms, the various Palmer properties, the Barclay Knight property, the Flowers Farm, the Shady Brook Farm, which is today still comparatively open. And
when did you send it, Helen? Because I don't have anything from you.
I sent it just before the meeting started.
Yeah. Well, I still don't have anything from you. I'll let you know if it doesn't show up.
Okay, and I'll send it again through Temple because that Juno account's kind of crappy.
Okay.
Okay, it's on my desktop, so it'll be easy to send. Okay, so and then and then we can talk about how to do a reliable report that we can submit with the National Register nomination. I think it will definitely show our new take on it, which is that the farms around Edgewood Village, we're driving a really vibrant local economy. And then once the railroad comes in 1876, it's an economy that's got a market in Philadelphia and New York. And they're specializing at that point. Because starting in 1876, you're getting the duck farm, you're getting the roses, you're getting the eggs, you're getting the asparagus from the Palmer family. And the Patterson farm instead is concentrating on truck products, so much more variable farming for everybody, all kinds of products instead of just concentrating on corn or wheat.
Yeah, a lot of orchard products.
Yeah, so they've already adapted their farming. They are not doing dairy very much at Patterson Farm, which is interesting. And the local farmers like the Wrights and Torberts were, but Patterson was not. So it was just fascinating to kind of just take a quick look at those numbers, and I think it's going to turn out that way. I hope so. And then we'll see. I think falls may pass us here and there a little bit, but then we're going to catch up and pass them.
It doesn't really matter, right? We just have to show what the agricultural history is.
The fact that that we're doing that and we're definitely shipping by the railroad and using the most modern technology is really important. And then so that kind of says we hope that we will continue to be cutting edge going forward in agriculture. Yeah.
So I mean, I had an opportunity to speak to Ben Harvey from the Pennsylvania SHPO office, and Ben is the person responsible for the state for reviewing National Register submissions. And we talked. He has Patterson Farm in the PA Share database. So he said, look, both properties. I mean, it's not one; it's both properties to them, right? Both properties are eligible, for the National Register. We need to update that eligibility, right? Because that determination has expired already, right? And then he also had requested. He said he appreciated the fact that we were looking at the agricultural significance of the farms and not just the architectural significance of the buildings, right? The big
right. I know that's the way forward.
Yeah, and he said that was the best way. What he asked, though, he said he would be happy to review the information that we had and
Yeah.
provide guidance on what they needed. He asked us to send him any documentation that we currently are working on, along with a site plan and some photos. And send him, he needs uploads through PA Share. So I'd like to kind of put a package together that we can send to him and then have a call with him just to get his feedback in terms of where does he see the gaps are in terms of what we need to do for the submission.
Joe, how specific was he about how we submit things to the PHMC?
He wants us to upload them on the PA Share and let him know, and then they'll download them from there.
Yeah, I re-upped my Compass. I have a Keystone Compass membership, and it was quite old. So I re-upped that. I resubmitted all the documentation so that I can get into the PHMC website for submitting grants, because I had submitted a Keystone grant back in like 2005
Right.
when we painted the Satterthwaite house. So I still had that documentation, but I can, but I resubmitted, and they still have both of our previous National Register nominations. And unfortunately, the information has been updated. So some of the information in both of those is flawed. And we need to basically pull it and edit a new submission that will reflect the current research.
And he said, don't worry about putting it on, not at this point, National Register paperwork, if you would, or form. He said, just
because I know they
whatever form you
accepted
have
all.
it in terms of PDF. He said, just send it to me. Let's review the information you have, and let's figure out, like, is that sufficient for us to do the nomination, or do we need to have more? So
That's great, Joe.
What they had before was not sufficient. So it'll be good.
He wants to make sure that we send him current photographs. So the site plan actually is very easy. We could just pull the site plans out of the ad hoc property committee. They have site plans for both farms. I talked to Jim and emailed with Jim this week. He said there are photographs available, recent photographs available on our Google Drive. So I'll look at those. But
I have those, yeah.
You have those?
Some of them are okay, but we could do better. I would wait on that until the light is better in the spring, and we actually need someone with an architectural lens to go in and do the structural issues in this.
Just wants to see the external elevations at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what's been submitted already is shows the interior of those houses with really nasty looking backgrounds, etc. So it would actually look better just open the way it is now with nothing in it. There was clutter, there were cats, there were, it was kind of, that's what they sent into the National Register. So it'd be nice to have clean shots.
I mean, I guess the question is what could we send for right now in terms of documentation? I mean, Helen, we have the lineage of ownership that you did for the ad hoc property committee for the farm. We have that document, and I didn't know if the work that Tom, that you were working on, if that was in a form that we could send over to him now.
It's everything I have is in spreadsheet format because there were sums and things that needed to get added up. But I can easily transfer it to a text document or a PDF. That's not a problem. Just
with a little bit of verbiage around. Again, it's just to have a call with him and say, look, Ben, this is what we're doing. This is what we have him review it, give us some feedback on what else we need. So we're kind of real directed in terms of what we're doing,
Tom is going to focus on the cash value of the farms, the number of acres that's under agriculture and the number that is not, and then the different kinds of crops that are being grown on the fields as he can find it, both in the agricultural census, but also in the regular federal census tells you how many horses, how many cows, how many pigs, certain ones of them. So some are more complete than others, and how many people are actually being supported by each of those farms. So that data goes in as well. But Tom will handle it, I know.
Yeah, most of that information is there. So
I know you've already got a good handle on it. I'm very confident.
So, Chris, I'm trying to figure out how to put this into some action items here. So I think there's a couple of action items. I will look at the photos to see, I mean, if they're adequate of the elevations, that ones that Jim had. And I'll also pull the site plans out of the ad hoc property committee report. Tom, if you could start to pull together the documentation pieces, again, just in PDFs that we could share with him.
Mhm.
And then we have to load it through PA Share. I don't think that we can do that with our accounts. I think we need to have the township's account do that. But I'll check with Majewski. I'll check with Jim and see. All right.
Yeah.
But maybe, and I know how on any other documentation that you think would be relevant. I mean, I think, again, you just did a great job on that, for the ad hoc property committee. I think we should just use that, as.
Yeah, it should be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good start to say, this is what we have. Now, what else do you want to see from us, So.
Yeah, I just got to prove that Tuncleave thing. That's the tough part. But anyway,
Yeah. So.
We'll make good arguments and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll reach out if we can get this over to him. Maybe in the next month or two, we can get a call set up and get some feedback.
Well, the value for the township in tourism dollars just cannot be underestimated. That we have probably the most intact Quaker site in all of Pennsylvania, right here in Lower Makefield. And it goes from 1690s to present day, and it's still being used. That is just phenomenal. And, speaks just, it's a miracle that it's still being handled the way it is.
Right. And I know if you saw from my email, I clarified with the ad hoc property committee that we would be doing the nomination.
Right.
And we don't need an external consultant to do that. But what we did ask the consultants is that in their master plan, they should assume that the property is eligible and will be submitted, and they should make sure that we're aware of all granting opportunities that brings the township.
And I understand correctly that they want it submitted as a combined grant. I mean,
so the township actually right now
wants
us. So right now the township sees it as two separate properties. Right now,
right.
What they have said is that's what Ben wants to talk to us about. Like, does it make sense to put it together
right.
as one? Do we keep it as separate? He even went as far as saying maybe we should put together an historic district there and actually put both of those properties in the historic district.
It promotes the historic district, so it actually gives it meaning to be, and that is the other prime thing. So you have basically a district of agricultural supply that supplies the various farms. This is the only one that still exists.
Right.
So the rest are all in development. So some of them are still open space. Yeah. I gave Tom a second page of lists of open space areas that the township pretty much controls that were former farms, to also add in as comparisons to the Patterson farm. So for instance, Makefield was previously the Elisha Reeves farm, and it's pretty much the same as when it was the Elisha Reeves farm, except now there's a big railroad embankment through the middle of it and Belmondo on the other side, which was part of the house structure, which is the next property up anyway. So the Reeves farm is still there, and you could actually find what was grown on the Reeves farm in the 1850 census and compare it to what was grown on the Patterson farm, and it's the same amount of acreage. So it's really kind of neat. North Park, same way. We have open areas that the township controls. Snipes Track is the James Large farm. The farms in Lower Makefield were actually smaller than the farms in Falls and Middletown and Upper Makefield, but they produced more goods. That's what was so interesting. So they are still there. Actually, the area where Quarry Hill School in Afton was another farm. I put that on your list. The area of Edgewood and the township building were two small farms. So you will have areas that the township actively controls that are pretty much farms from the past that are now open space, or, in dire straits could be reconverted into farms. So it is kind of interesting.
Okay. Good. Chris, you got all that? Yeah. All right, good.
I'm going to keep Tom very busy.
Let's move on to Slate Hill. We talked a little bit about that already, what we're trying to accomplish there. I think probably the most important topic is that we would like to apply for a Keystone grant to support the preservation and restoration work. Tom and I discussed it. We were first thinking about doing a planning grant in order to develop a master plan, and then decided that a master plan for a cemetery is a little bit unusual.
Yeah, that's kind of, we're not adding to it.
Yeah, it's really it's very simple. It's
Unless
the
John
wall,
wants a slot.
it's the wall, it's the gravestones, and it's the landscaping, right? So we've already been in touch with the township around the landscaping and the removal of the dead trees and cleanup of the perimeter. So I need to go back talk to Derek about that a little bit more in the spring. Actually, if the weather stays as warm, we could probably do it sooner rather than later. And then, we have to get some quotes in terms of the repair of the wall. So Tom had reached out. He has some people for us to contact, and we can.
Yeah, I reached out to the barn company. They're an organization in New Jersey that buys old barns from properties that no longer want them, and then they sell them to people that want barns on their property, and they reconstruct them in a historically accurate way, including whatever foundations need to go in. And I got the name of 2 masons from them, and I reached out to both of them. Keith Childs, I actually spoke to. He's from Bluebell, but he knew exactly what I was talking about. He described the cemetery to the T. So he knew that he knew it. He knew exactly where it was.
Right.
He sounded very interested in it. He says, the only problem is, he says, I'm booked through the spring. I said, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. So I'm hoping that we're going to meet at the cemetery this weekend and do that. I reached out. His name is Keith Childs. I reached out to another guy, John Van Sellis, who the barn company also gave me. He's also a historic mason, and I just got his voicemail. I haven't heard back from him yet. So, and I have one other mason that I have to reach out to.
There was at the ceremony for the Slate Hill soldiers 2 years ago. There was a stone restoration person from Newtown Cemetery, and I'm sure Newtown Cemetery would know who he is, who just does cleaning and recutting of old stones. And he said he would do our famous stone for free, and he would do one other 17th century or 18th century stone, which I mentioned, the Anderson stone, if I can find it. And he said it's amazing. He has all kinds of techniques to make the writing pop out, and then he can recut it. And then he said after that he would charge if we wanted other ones restored, but he said he would do that for free because he said, as far as he's seen it, it is the oldest tombstone he has ever seen in Pennsylvania.
So you're talking about the grave markers.
The markers, yeah.
The what?
Okay. You're talking about the grave markers.
Yeah, the markers themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that is something that we talked about, because the sharp stone is now sunken to a point that you can't read the bottom of it. And some of the detail is I mean, I remember when I first saw it in 84, 85, and it was much clearer. So it's obviously been recut over the years, which then begs the point, is it real? And I don't know the answer to that because I can't find him. But as far as I know, in the earliest Davis and Battle histories of Bucks County, that stone has always been pointed out as the oldest tombstone in Pennsylvania. And given that, I think it might be one of the oldest tombstones in the East Coast. I mean, I don't know of any other that's from the 17th century. So it really, again, marketing wise, John, we kind of keep it on the down low because we don't want people vandalizing it, but we have some amazing things here in Lower Makefield, and that stone is one of them. Obviously, the fact that it's in a Quaker cemetery is a little weird because Quakers did not mark graves before 1820. So that's why the cemetery is particularly vacant at the front, because Quakers wouldn't mark the graves. That was a sign of vanity, and they're all about humility. So the fact that a child, an 11-year-old child, got a tombstone means that he was not Quaker. And the fact that it's just outside the original boundary of the original cemetery means he was buried outside the cemetery, probably by a family that had come to visit Penn at Penn's, or the steward at Pennsbury Manor to pay their taxes, and had died while he was visiting Pennsylvania, and they didn't want to bury him in Quaker ground in Falsington, so they put him in our cemetery. That's the only way that he could have gotten there. So, and the fact he's there at all is just really amazing. So, did
Joe,
anyone point it out to you when you were there?
the grave? Yeah, I saw it. Joe actually showed it to me.
Did John see it when he was there?
John wasn't with us this weekend.
I've been there, and
Joe's-
it's been a while since I've been there, but yeah,
Okay.
I was not there this weekend though.
Since John's here, we should mention that this Keystone grant, this construction grant that we're planning, requires a 50-50 match. So
Okay.
whether that comes from the township or from some other sources, I don't know, but
Yeah.
How much is
wanted
the
to mention.
grant request for?
Well, we don't know yet. We're getting the quote.
Okay.
But I guess what we've talked to Majewski is that we'll apply for the grant by March 1st. I think the awarding of the grant doesn't happen until about September. And then I think you have 12 to 18 months to use the funds. So what Jim's point was, if you get the grant, we put it into next year's budget, So.
Yeah. Yeah, Megan said that it's capped at 100,000
Oh, okay.
each. So if we get 100,000, then we have to get another 100,000.
Right.
Yeah, I think the previous wall repair was around 24,000.
Okay.
I'm thinking that we're going to be north of that, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but I mean,
ballpark.
that was 1990s, so you
Yeah.
know, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, there's at least 150 feet of wall that needs to be repaired. And interestingly, this guy Chris said that they photographed the wall. They somehow mark the stones. They take it apart, lay them all out, so that when they reconstruct it, all the stones go back into the original positions. It sounds like a headache to me.
So Tom, what we had heard, so Derek from Public Works has someone come out and look at it. And what he has said is, in that section of the wall that we're looking at, the field stones are not usable, right? They just have decayed so much. Now, again, this is why it's good to have us to get some other details on it, whether they can reuse that or not. But I just wanted to kind of give you that heads up in case he comes
Okay.
out and says that. We've heard that before, which is really going to drive the cost, right? If we have to go get new field stone,
It's hard to imagine that stone can not be usable, but I mean, unless it's really rotten. And I didn't think that was the case, but I'm not an
No,
expert.
we had an offer from the stone cutter up. Oh shoot, Jim Majewski knows this. That when we were repairing the wall last, it was an Eagle project when we closed up the opening that where a tree had fallen and broken the wall. The gravel quarry up on near Pipersville, up north of whatever, Lahaska, not Lahaska, up along the river, had offered to provide the township with stone gratis if we would send a truck up. And at the time, Jim thought it was going to be too expensive to send the truck up. But I think when we're looking at repairing it, that's definitely something that we should request.
Okay.
And, we would definitely give them credit for donating whatever they can.
So I think, Tom, the decision we'll need to make, because it sounds like we'll have a couple of quotes on repair of the wall, as well as the quote from Chris regarding the restoring of the markers. And then we just decide we'll put together a kind of a high level master plan in terms of what work needs to be done, but then we just need to make a decision on what we submit this year.
I don't
think
suppose that the township has tree removal capabilities, do they, John?
Yeah, they do.
They do.
Majewski was taking care of, actually, with Greg Huckelbridge, was taking care of removing some of the locusts and definitely taking all the ivy out of the trees. So that was already under consideration, and they have a budget for so many trees per year to be removed. Trees are the enemy of cemeteries. And the garden club has always kind of fought us on this, but yeah, they need to be trimmed and kept to a low profile.
They got quotes for removing the dead trees, which are between, like, down around the two sections. And then I also asked them to clean up a lot of the larger, if you would, branches and things that are around the perimeter. Some of the smaller stuff we might need to, have a volunteer organization come out with some rakes and bags and do all of that, right? But there's some of the stuff that's back along that perimeter is too big for volunteers to be moving. I mean, you need a chainsaw to cut it up, right? So
we had 2 dump trucks of debris moved by scout troops over the years. I mean, the troops are amazing. 15 and 16-year-old boys can clear a lot of brush.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can be done by volunteers, but the stone wall is something that definitely has to be done by an expert. And I would agree that it probably was laid up stone rather than stucco. Somebody added that in the 19th century, I suspect. But,
yeah, it's only that one part of the wall.
Yeah, one
that
part that's got the stucco, it's all falling off.
Yeah.
So that needs to come off and look like the other 2 sections.
Yep,
and then
yep.
it would be, the difficulty is the capstones, that they are, when they're stolen, which they have been, then the water gets into the wall and breaks it.
Yeah, there weren't many capstones missing, but
just a
almost
few.
all of them are loose. So
Yeah, that's the issue, is those capstones.
they need to be re-cemented down, remortared down.
But
But that's easy.
we're going to need to make a decision on what direction we go before our next meeting, right? Because our next meeting is around the time of February. But
Well, John should go take a look.
So I think what we really want to do, Tom, is once you get those quotes and I get the quotes from Chris, maybe we'll send them out just to get people's feedback, or maybe you and I make a recommendation on what we do this year. Because I think by the beginning of February, we probably should start working on this grant.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, Megan hadn't sent you those examples yet, had she?
No, I have it here. I will follow up with her afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, and get that. Okay. Yeah. Then the last topic for tonight on the agenda is the update on the ad hoc property committee. So, I think the last time we spoke, the ad hoc property committee had put out an RFP to vendors to come in to develop a master plan for Patterson Farm, and we got 2 responses to that RFP. We reviewed them just last week, and you can find this actually if you go onto the township's YouTube site. We actually had the 2 vendors come in and we posed some questions and make a presentation on that. So what remains to be done now, and we have a meeting tomorrow night, is make a decision, or make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors as to which of the 2 vendors would be preferable for developing the master plan. So we hope to reach that decision tomorrow night, make it, put that on to the Board of Supervisor for, I guess, the end of this month, John, or probably the end of this month. I think we'd have a few weeks to get it on to the agenda.
Yeah, probably be the February 1st meeting, I think.
Yeah, probably the February 1st meeting, right? And then what will we do then, once if we can get the approval from the board, then we would start the master planning work. So I'll keep you updated in terms of who decides what. If you want to kind of look at the 2 proposals and what was discussed, there's like 2 hours worth of video on YouTube. You can see both vendors and what they proposed. I would say that I probably shouldn't say too much on this. I think both of them are good. Both of them can do. They each have their own strengths, but we're gonna cover that in tomorrow night's meeting. Okay. Good. Any other topics that we should be discussing this evening? If not, Erica, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
If that's the case, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn if people would like.
Second.
You make the motion? Tom makes the motion to adjourn?
Oh, I thought you made the motion. I motioned to it. I was seconding your motion.
I will second Tom's motion.
There you go.
All in favor of calling it a night?
All right.
All right,
Aye.
good.
Bye-bye.
And welcome, John.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
We'll
Good
be in
job, Joe.
touch.
Nice,
Okay.
good meeting.
All right, take care. Bye.